Alright everybody, welcome back. So I know most of y'all would have been more excited about the Mika missile, and don't worry, I will be covering that with due time, but I just had to take a look at this because the French just happened to get the best F-16 in the game, at least for ARB. I never thought I'd be saying this, but yeah, here we are. The Fox 3 F-16s I wouldn't say are necessarily the meta jet this patch. I would definitely say that goes to the F-15C and J, but nevertheless they are in a very good spot. And of course this new F-16 is in a great spot as well. So this is the F-16AM. It's a Block 20 MLU essentially, which you're already familiar with in the Chinese tech tree, but it's an even more modern version, the one that we have right there. The biggest thing, of course, that it does get access to both the AIM-9M and the AIM-120 AMRAAM, both of which are very critical, and both of which, of course, are also found on the F-16C. Now, the main difference this thing has from the F-16C in terms of ARB is in its flight performance. So it does have a weaker engine and slightly worse thrust-to-weight ratio overall at most areas, but it is noticeably lighter. If you've flown the F-16ADF in either the US or Italian tech trees, you'll know exactly how this flies because it literally has a copy and paste flight model. When you compare those to the F-16C, you see that, while the F-16AM is 7,850 kilograms, the F-16C is a whopping 8,950. Substantial amount more. Now, the powerful engine makes up for most of that, but it does mean that in terms of the dogfight, if you're not in a proper rate fight, the F-16ADF is going to do better almost every single time, especially at those lower speeds. Which is exactly what happens in ARB, because you're not sitting there rate fighting at exactly the right rate speed, which sure, the F-16C may do a little bit better at. No, you're going to be using your mouse and keyboard and turning inside of each other as hard as you can, which the AM is going to do just better. Besides that, it does have the same amount of countermeasures normally that the F-16C has, which of course is 120, which you can customize as much as you want. Me personally, I've been running 50 flare 70 chaff because there are a ton of radar missiles flying around these days, and I just want to make sure I have enough to counter them. But you are able to do something a little interesting. You see, this gets some extra countermeasure options that the F-16C does not. It gets these really interesting countermeasure pods, which can give you an extra 180 countermeasures. These pods are also going to give you something which is called MAWS, or Missile Approach Warning System, which will warn you of any missile fired, including IR ones. Now, me personally, I would rather have the 2 extra AMRAAMs because these do go on your inner pylons, which is why you won't see me running it in this video. But if you would like extra countermeasures and you would like that extra warning, then by all means, and it is great to have the option. You'll see me doing BVR in the background, and admittedly that is one area where the F-16C is like marginally better than the F-16AM, just because at these higher altitudes, it does have a thrust advantage from around 1,000 kilometers up to 1,800 kilometers an hour. It's a very small one, and the thrust to weight is basically the same the entire time. And realistically, in an actual ARB match, you aren't going to notice the difference, but it is just something to keep in mind. Although personally, that dogfight performance is definitely what I would prefer to have, if you're going to have such similar performance overall anyways. Speaking of, that performance is very helpful when it comes to notching and chaffing missiles like you're seeing me doing right here with the J-11. Being able to get that nose around very quickly is definitely helpful. Especially because as I am climbing like this, I keep having people popping up that aren't actually spotted that I am having to defeat their missiles very quickly thereafter. So, especially that lower speed turn ability, because you're bleeding so much speed as you're trying to notch, will definitely come in useful. Another great thing you probably noticed is the fact that it does actually have HMD, just like the F-16C. Its HMD is technically worse because it doesn't have the radar HMD function. Personally, I never use that. I have a really poor time using it. It loves just refusing to lock. I just use the IR, HMD, and that works totally fine. But if you do use radar HMD, that is something to keep in mind. Having the HMD is nice, but not essential, especially if you only have AIM-9Ms like this thing has. The 9M is a good missile, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have that really cracked, insane dogfight performance that the R-73 has, which, by the way, if you keep an eye on the footage, you are about to see that from this SC-27 right here, unfortunately. But especially if you're diving on a group of people, for example, and you gotta fire off some AIM-9Ms in rapid succession, it is always great to have that ability. Combining this with the Mirage 2000 means that France is in a very competitive spot when it comes to top tier air, and that is only for air because of course the F-16 is a multi-role aircraft, and one of the other upgrades to the MLU means that it gets basically every kind of air-to-ground munition that you can expect from the F-16C. The biggest thing of course is the fact that you do get access to 6 of the thermal Mavericks, which you'll see me doing right here, and also paveways as well. Now, it doesn't have the absolutely insane amount of laser-guided bombs that something like the Barak has, for example, but if you do want to swap the MAVs, you are able to bring more laser-guided bombs there as well. Speaking of MAVs, this thing gets access to, of course, the Ds, like I said, but it also does get the AGM-65G, which is one that has the SAP warhead. They are better missiles, but personally, I would not recommend bringing them just because you can only carry 2 of them. The SAP Mavericks are much heavier than the Heat ones, which is why you can't carry the full 6 in the rack. The rack just can't support it. But the problem is that means you only get 2 launches. And so, for example, in this case, right, both of my first 2 Mavericks failed to kill anything. If I was not running the Ds, then I would have been completely out of luck and only had my GPUs left, which my GPU also failed. Bringing the 6 Ds, even though they have worse damage, does give you more chances to get kills, which in my opinion is more important. France did already have the Mirage 2005F, which had very capable air-to-ground loadouts of its own, but if you have plenty of spawn points to burn, this gives you multiple spawns without you needing to use backups. And I mean, if you want Mavericks instead of, whatever the French have to offer, then by all means. Gonna be a slightly shorter video today than usual, but I mean, a lot of this is already what I've covered before on the channel with the F-16C, just a little bit lighter and a little bit better. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll catch y'all next time. So, peace, y'all.